The crystal champagne flute slipped from my fingers the moment I saw Julian cross the hotel lobby toward the exit. It shattered against the marble floor, sending bubbles and glass shards across the hem of my ivory gown. 3 months of planning. 8 fittings for this dress. A guest list of 200 of our closest friends and family. And Julian was leaving. Julian. I called his name once quietly because that's who I'd always been with him. The calm one. The understanding one. The one who smoothed over every rough edge he left behind. He didn't stop. I gathered the skirt of my gown and walked after him, my heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that matched my accelerating heart. The guests parted around me like water around stone, their whispers already starting. I could hear them, feel them like tiny pricks against my skin. Julian. This time I grabbed his arm just before he reached the door. Where are you going? The ceremony hasn't even started. He turned and I saw that familiar look on his face. The one that said whatever I was feeling, whatever I needed, it would have to wait. There was something more important. There was always something more important. It's Isabel, he said, as if that explained everything. She fell down the stairs at her apartment building. She's at the hospital. Isabel. His sponsored student. The girl from the countryside who he'd rescued from poverty and brought into our lives 6 months ago. The one whose name appeared in our conversations more and more frequently, whose text messages lit up his phone at dinner, whose emergencies always seemed to happen at the worst possible moments. The hospital, I repeated, my voice flat. She fell downstairs, and you're leaving our engagement party. She's alone, Clara. She has no family here. No one. He ran a hand through his dark hair, that gesture he always made when he thought I was being unreasonable. I sponsored her. I'm responsible for her. What kind of person would I be if I abandoned her when she needed me? The kind of person who stays at his own engagement party, I said. My voice cracked on the last word and I hated myself for it. Julian's jaw tightened. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're jealous of a 19-year-old girl who just got hurt. Do you hear yourself? I'm jealous that on the most important day of my life you're choosing someone else. I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice so only he could hear. If you walk out that door, Julian, we're done. I mean it. He laughed. Actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut deeper than any insult. You don't mean that. You've never meant it when you've said it before. He was right. I hadn't meant it before. I'd threatened to leave a dozen times over the past 3 years, over the actresses he took to charity events, the models who posted photos from his yacht, the endless stream of beautiful women who seemed to orbit around him like planets around a sun. I'd always come back. I'd always convinced myself that next time would be different. But this time wasn't about another woman. This time was about me. About us. About a day that was supposed to be ours. Julian. My father's voice cut through the tension. He'd followed me across the lobby, my mother close behind him. What's going on? The guests are waiting. Julian straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, the ones I'd given him for our 2nd anniversary. I have an emergency. Clara will explain. And then he was gone. The door swung shut behind him and I stood there in my 3-month planned 8 fittings 200 guest dress, watching the man I loved disappear. My mother's hand found my elbow. Clara? What happened? I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I stood frozen in the lobby of the hotel while behind me, 200 people waited for a ceremony that would never happen. My father stepped in front of me, blocking my view of the door. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Sweetheart, do you want me to make an announcement? An announcement. An announcement that the groom had left. That the engagement was over. That 3 years of my life had just been erased in the time it took a door to close. No. I heard myself speak, but the voice didn't sound like mine. I'll do it. I walked back into the ballroom on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The faces blurred together, aunts, uncles, family, friends, colleagues. All of them watching me. All of them waiting. I stepped onto the small stage where Julian and I were supposed to have stood together in an hour, accepting congratulations and cutting cake and pretending that our love was the kind that lasted forever. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice carried through the room, amplified by the microphone we'd set up for speeches. "I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. Julian had an emergency he needed to attend to. The engagement party will not be taking place today." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I saw my mother press her hand to her mouth. I saw my father's shoulders sag. I saw the woman who'd always hated me, Marissa, from my college days, smile into her champagne glass. I stepped off the stage and walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby and into the bathroom. I locked myself in a stall and sat on the floor in my 8 fittings 3-month plan dress, and I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out my phone. There were messages. Dozens of them. From friends asking if I was okay. From my brother demanding to know where Julian was. From people who'd heard through the grapevine and wanted details I wasn't ready to give. And one from Isabel. I almost deleted it without reading. But something made me open it. "I know he'll come. He always does." The message was time-stamped from an hour ago. Before she fell. Before the hospital. Before Julian walked out. I stared at the words until my vision blurred, and then I read them again. She knew. She'd known he would leave. She'd planned it. I scrolled up through our message history, what little there was. She'd added me on social media months ago, and I'd accepted because that's what you do when your boyfriend sponsors someone. We'd exchanged maybe 3 messages total, all of them polite, all of them meaningless. Except for this one. This one she'd sent today, knowing I would see it eventually. Knowing it would hurt. Or maybe wanting me to see it. Wanting me to know that she could make him leave and I couldn't make him stay. My phone buzzed. Julian's name appeared on the screen. I answered. I didn't say hello. "She's going to be okay," he said. His voice was tired, but there was something else underneath it. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. "She has a mild concussion and a sprained wrist, but nothing broken. They're keeping her overnight for observation." That's good. My voice was hollow. "I'm glad she's okay." "Clara." A pause. "I'm sorry I had to leave. I know today was important to you. Important to me. Not important to us. Not important to him. Important to me. When are you coming back?" I asked. "The party's probably over by now, isn't it? I'll come by your place tomorrow. We'll talk." "No." I stood up, smoothing my dress with hands that shook. "When are you coming back tonight?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm going to stay here until she's asleep." "She's scared, Clara. She's just a kid." "She's 19, Julian. That's not a kid. That's a grown woman." "Clara." His voice sharpened. "Don't do this. Not now." "Don't do what?" "Don't ask my fiancé to come home on the night of our engagement party. Don't wonder why he's staying at the hospital with another woman instead of being with me." I was crying now, finally, the tears hot and fast down my cheeks. "Don't question why that woman sent me a message an hour before she fell saying she knew you'd come." "What message? What are you talking about?" I told him. I read him the words. And when I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Julian? Say something." "She's just a girl, Clara. She's scared and alone and probably looking for attention. That doesn't change anything between us." "Doesn't it?" I leaned against the bathroom wall, the cold tile seeping through my dress. "She knew you'd leave. She knew you'd choose her. How did she know that, Julian?" "Because I'm her sponsor. Because I told her I'd always be there for her. That's all it is." "That's not all it is, and you know it." I wiped my face with the back of my hand, smearing makeup across my skin. I've watched you fall for her over the past 6 months. I've watched her name replace mine in our conversations. I've watched you light up every time she calls. And I've told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid, that you loved me. I do love you. Then come home. Silence. Julian. Come. Home. Clara, I can't just leave her here alone. I hung up. I stood in that bathroom for a long time, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were red. Her dress, the dress she'd chosen so carefully, the dress she'd imagined walking down an aisle in, was wrinkled and stained from sitting on a bathroom floor. She looked broken. But somewhere underneath the brokenness, something else was stirring. Something that felt like anger, but cleaner. Sharper. Something that felt like finally, after 3 years of bending and twisting and reshaping myself to fit around Julian's life, I was remembering the shape I used to be. I pulled out my phone again and called my brother. Daniel. My voice was steady now. I need your help. Clara? Are you okay? What happened? Mom called me, she's freaking out. What did Julian do? I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. But I need to leave. Tonight. Can you help me? Another pause. Leave? Leave where? Clara, what are you talking about? Amber. The company needs someone to open the market there. You said so yourself last week. I'm going. Clara, you're not thinking straight. You're upset. Give it a day, sleep on it, and then... I've slept on it for 3 years, Daniel. I met my own eyes in the mirror. I'm done sleeping. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. Okay. Okay, I'll make some calls. But Clara, are you sure? This is big. This is leaving everything behind. No. I shook my head at my reflection. Everything I need to leave behind is right here. What's in Amber? That's what I'm going to find. I walked out of the bathroom and through the hotel lobby. The ballroom doors were closed now, the guests gone. A cleaning crew was already working, sweeping away the remnants of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I didn't look back. The flight to Amber was 14 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window at the clouds, replaying the last 3 years of my life like a movie I couldn't turn off. I met Julian at a charity gala. He was handsome, charismatic, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. He'd sponsored a table at the event, and I'd been seated next to him by some twist of fate. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. By the end of the week, we'd had our first date. By the end of the month, I was in love. Or what I thought was love. In hindsight, the signs were all there. The way he'd cancel plans at the last minute because something more important came up. The way he'd forget anniversaries and birthdays but remember every detail about the women he took to business dinners. The way his friends would look at me with something that wasn't quite respect, tolerance, maybe, or pity. I'd ignored it all. I'd told myself that love meant accepting someone as they were, flaws and all. That relationships required work, compromise, sacrifice. That if I just loved him enough, if I just gave enough of myself, eventually he'd see me. Really see me. He never did. First time in Amber. The voice came from the seat next to me. I turned to find a man about my age, dark-haired and sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to hold more warmth than they had any right to. Sorry, he said, smiling apologetically. I didn't mean to intrude. You just looked like you were a million miles away. Something like that. I turned back to the window. And yes, first time. Business or pleasure? I almost laughed. Business. Definitely business. He nodded, apparently sensing that I wasn't in the mood for conversation. He pulled out a book, a collection of poetry I noticed, and settled into his seat. I should have been grateful for the silence. Instead, I found myself stealing glances at him over the next hour. There was something familiar about him, something that tugged at the edges of my memory. Then it clicked. Marcus, I said. Marcus Chen. He looked up from his book, surprise flickering across his face. Then recognition. Clara? Clara Winters. I laughed, a real laugh, the first one in what felt like forever. I can't believe it. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. He closed his book and turned toward me fully. Last I heard, you were running some big marketing firm back home. Engaged to some big shot, wasn't it? The smile faltered on my face. Things change. Marcus's expression shifted. He didn't push, didn't ask for details, didn't offer the pity I'd been dreading. He just nodded and said, yeah, they do. We'd known each other in college, theater club, just like in every cliché story. He'd been the quiet one, the technical director who worked behind the scenes while the actors got all the attention. We'd collaborated on dozens of productions, and somewhere along the way we'd become friends. Good friends. The kind who stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. Then I'd met Julian, and somehow, without meaning to, I'd let that friendship slip away. I heard you got a job here, I said. Teaching, right? Professor of Dramatic Literature at the University of Amber. He smiled, and there was something shy in it, something that reminded me of the boy he'd been. It's a good life. Quiet. Peaceful. Sounds perfect. What about you? What brings you to Amber on such short notice? I told him. Not everything, not the bathroom floor or the ruined dress or the message from Isabel, but enough. The engagement, that wasn't. The need to get away. The family business and the new market and the chance to start over. He listened without interrupting, without judging. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. That's a lot to carry. I'm not carrying it anymore. I said it with more certainty than I felt. That's the point. He smiled again, and this time there was something else in it. Something that made my chest feel tight in a way that had nothing to do with Julian. Amber's a good place to start over, he said. I should know. The flight passed faster after that. We talked about college, about the plays we'd done together, about the people we'd lost touch with. We talked about his work, my family's business, the city I was about to call home. By the time the plane began its descent, I felt lighter than I had in months. You know, Marcus said as we gathered our things, if you need someone to show you around, I'm pretty familiar with the city by now. Nothing too touristy, just the good stuff. The places where real people go. I hesitated. The old Clara would have said no. The old Clara would have been loyal to a relationship that didn't deserve loyalty, would have kept herself locked away from anything that might complicate the life she'd built around Julian. But the old Clara was gone. She'd died on a bathroom floor in an engagement dress. I'd like that, I said. His smile widened. Great. How about Saturday? There's this little cafe near the university that makes the best coffee you've ever had. We can start there. Saturday works. We exchanged numbers properly this time, not the casual way you add a contact for networking purposes, and walked off the plane together. He helped me find a taxi, waited until I was settled inside, and gave me a small wave as the car pulled away. I watched him disappear into the airport crowd, and for the first time since Julian walked out that door, I felt something other than pain. I felt hope. The first week in Amber was a blur of jet lag, meetings, and paperwork. My family's company had been trying to break into this market for years, and the fact that they'd finally sent me meant they were serious. No more half measures. No more testing the waters. It was time to dive in. The office was small but well located, with a view of the harbor that made the long hours worthwhile. The team was eager and competent, grateful to finally have someone on the ground who could make decisions. By Friday, I'd signed off on 3 new contracts and scheduled meetings for a dozen more. By Friday night, I was exhausted enough to sleep for 12 hours straight. Saturday morning, I woke to a text from Marcus. Coffee still on? There's a farmer's market near the cafe today. Thought you might like it. I smiled at my phone like an idiot. Coffee sounds perfect. What time? 11 work for you? I'll send you the address. I spent the next hour getting ready, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on something casual but not too casual, nice but not trying too hard nice. By the time I walked out the door, I'd changed my mind 6 times and was seriously considering just going back to bed. But I didn't. I went. The cafe was exactly the kind of place I would have loved in another life, small and slightly chaotic, with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu and the smell of fresh bread hanging in the air. Marcus was already there, sitting at a table by the window with 2 cups of coffee. I didn't know what you liked, he said as I sat down, so I got you a latte. Figured that was a safe bet. It is. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and took a sip. It was perfect. Thank you. He smiled that shy smile again. So, how was your first week? We talked for hours. About work, about the city, about nothing at all. He told me about his students, his research, the book he was trying to write. I told him about the contracts I'd signed, the team I was building, the plans I had for the company's future. Neither of us mentioned the past. Neither of us asked about the people we used to be. It was like we'd both agreed, without saying a word, to exist only in the present. After coffee, we walked through the farmer's market. He bought a bag of apples from an old woman who called him son and pressed an extra one into his hand. I bought a scarf from a young couple who'd just started their own business. We shared a pastry from a bakery stall and argued about whether the cinnamon or the chocolate was better. By the time the sun started to set, my cheeks ached from smiling. I should get back, I said reluctantly. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course. He walked me to the taxi stand and for a moment we just stood there, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. This was nice, I said. Really nice. Yeah. He looked at me and in the fading light his eyes seemed darker, deeper. It was. The taxi pulled up. I got in, rolled down the window and waved as we drove away. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The way he'd laughed when I made a stupid joke. The way he'd listened when I talked about work. The way his hand had brushed against mine when we walked through the market, and how neither of us had pulled away. It was too soon. I knew that. I was barely a week out of a 3-year relationship and here I was already thinking about another man. It was reckless. It was unfair to him, to me, to whatever this could become. But when I closed my eyes, I didn't see Julian walking out that door. I saw Marcus smiling at me across a cafe table, and for the first time in years I let myself imagine what it might be like to be happy. 3 months passed in a blur of work and weekends and Marcus. The company's amber branch grew faster than anyone had predicted. The contracts I'd signed in that first week led to partnerships that led to more contracts. By the end of the 2nd month, we'd doubled our projected revenue. By the end of the 3rd, my brother called to tell me that headquarters was considering a permanent expansion. All because of you, Daniel said. I knew you had it in you. I hadn't known. For 3 years with Julian, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be good at something. To be respected for my mind instead of my patience. To be valued for what I could do instead of what I could tolerate. Marcus reminded me. He showed up at my office with lunch when I forgot to eat. He sent articles he thought I'd find interesting, books he thought I'd love, music he thought I'd like. He listened to me talk about work problems without pretending to understand the details, asked questions that made me think differently, celebrated my victories like they were his own. And slowly, carefully, I started to fall for him. It wasn't like it had been with Julian. That had been lightning, sudden and bright and consuming, leaving no room for thought or hesitation. This was different. This was slow and steady like a river wearing down stone. This was friendship first, then something more, then something I couldn't name. I didn't know if he felt it too. Sometimes I thought I saw it in his eyes, a look that lingered a moment too long, a warmth that went beyond friendship. But he never pushed, never presumed, never made me feel like I owed him anything. Until one night in December. It was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones. We'd gone to see a play at a small theater near the university, something experimental and strange that neither of us fully understood. On the way back to my apartment, we stopped at a bridge overlooking the harbor. The city lights reflected off the water, painting it in gold and silver. Marcus leaned against the railing and I stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm against mine. "Do you ever think about what you'd tell your younger self?" he asked. "If you could go back." I thought about it. About the girl I'd been at 22, fresh out of college, full of dreams I'd let someone else talk me out of. About the years I'd spent waiting for a man who never showed up. About the night I'd sat on a bathroom floor in a ruined dress and finally chose myself. "I'd tell her she's stronger than she knows," I said. "I'd tell her it's okay to leave. I'd tell her she doesn't have to set herself on fire to keep someone else warm." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I'd tell myself to say something. Back then, in college. I'd tell myself not to wait." I turned to look at him. In the dim light, his face was half in shadow, but his eyes were clear. And in them, I saw everything I'd been too afraid to name. "Marcus, I know it's soon." He turned to face me fully. "I know you're still healing. I know there's probably 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. But Clara, I've been waiting to say this since I was 20 years old and you walked into that theater club meeting and I couldn't look away. My heart was pounding. You never said anything. You were with someone. And then you were happy, or I thought you were happy, and I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want to be the reason you had to choose." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "But you're not with him anymore. And I'm tired of watching you from across a room." "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered. "I don't know if I have anything left to give." "That's okay." His hand cupped my cheek, warm against my cold skin. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you how I feel. What you do with that information is up to you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw all the things I'd been too blind to see before. The patience. The kindness. The way he looked at me like I was something precious, something worth waiting for. I leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking something. Then his arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, and the kiss deepened into something more. Something that felt like coming home. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. "I think," I said, my voice shaky, "that I might be ready after all." He laughed, that shy, warm laugh I'd come to love, and kissed me again. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment alone. The months that followed were the happiest of my life. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Work was still stressful. The company's expansion brought new challenges every day. Marcus's teaching schedule was demanding, and sometimes we went days without seeing each other. But the gaps between those days were filled with something I'd never had before. Something real. He made me breakfast on Sunday mornings, always the same thing, eggs and toast and coffee, because that's what his mother had made him as a child. He held my hand when we walked through the city, not caring who saw. He read my work emails when I was too tired to focus and offered suggestions that actually helped. He told me I was beautiful in the morning, with my hair a mess and sleep in my eyes, and somehow I believed him. I started to believe a lot of things I'd stopped believing. That I was enough. That I deserved to be happy. That love didn't have to hurt. By the time spring arrived, I couldn't imagine my life without him. We were sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when he turned to me with that look in his eyes, the one that meant he had something important to say. "Clara." He took my hand. "I know we haven't been together that long. I know there's no rush. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone. And I don't want to wait another decade to tell you." My heart started racing. "Tell me what?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I love you, he said. I've loved you since we were 20 years old, and I've loved you every day since. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. Will you marry me? He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond set in platinum. Perfect. I looked at him, at this man who had waited years for me, who had been my friend before he was anything else, who had seen me at my worst and loved me anyway. Yes, I said. Yes, Marcus. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I kissed him as the last light of the sun disappeared below the horizon. That night I called my parents. My mother cried. My father asked to speak to Marcus, and whatever he said made Marcus go quiet and serious for a long moment before nodding and saying, "I will, sir. I promise." I called Daniel next. He whooped so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Finally," he shouted. "Clara, finally. I've been waiting for this since college." "What do you mean, finally? Come on. You really think I didn't notice how he looked at you back then? The guy was crazy about you. We all knew it. We just assumed you'd figure it out eventually." I hadn't figured it out. I'd been too busy with Julian, too busy trying to make something work that was never going to work, too busy ignoring the love that had been right in front of me all along. But I'd figured it out now. And that was what mattered. We set a date for the following spring. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Marcus's parents would fly in from overseas. My family would come from home. We'd get married in a garden overlooking the harbor, with the city we'd built our life in as our backdrop. I was happy. Truly, deeply happy. And then Julian found me. I was at the office, reviewing contracts for a new partnership when my assistant buzzed my desk. "There's a man here to see you," she said. "He doesn't have an appointment. Says he's an old friend." Something in her voice made me uneasy. "Name?" "Julian. Julian Croft." The pen slipped from my fingers. For a moment I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. 3 years. It had been 3 years since I'd walked out of that hotel, since I'd sat on that bathroom floor, since I'd watched the man I thought I loved choose someone else. 3 years of building a new life, a better life, a life that didn't include him. And now he was here. "Clara." My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Should I send him away? Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to hide in my office until he gave up and left. But another part, the part that had spent 3 years becoming someone new, knew that running wasn't the answer. Not anymore. "No," I said. "Send him in." The door opened and Julian walked through. He looked different. Older somehow, despite only 3 years having passed. His hair was grayer at the temples, his face more lined. The confidence that had once radiated from him like heat from a fire was dimmed, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. "Clara." His voice cracked on my name. You look incredible." I didn't stand. Didn't offer him a seat. "What are you doing here, Julian?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I came to talk to you. I've been trying to find you for months. Your family wouldn't tell me anything. Your brother practically threatened me when I called. Daniel's protective. I know. I deserve it." He took a step closer and I held up a hand. "Stay where you are. Say what you came to say and then leave." He stopped, hurt flickering across his face. But he did as I asked. "I made a mistake," he said. "A terrible mistake. Leaving you that day was the worst thing I've ever done. I've regretted it every single day since. It's been 3 years, Julian. I know. I know. And I should have come sooner. I should have fought for you. But I thought you'd come back. You always came back." He laughed bitterly. "I was an idiot." "Yes. You were." He flinched. "Clara, I'm not the same person I was. I've changed. I ended things with Isabel years ago. I cut off all those so-called friends who treated you badly. I've been in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand why I pushed away the only woman who ever really loved me. I said nothing. I still love you, Clara. His voice was raw, desperate. I never stopped loving you. And I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Please. Come home with me. Let me spend the rest of my life making this right. Slowly, I stood. I walked around my desk until I was standing in front of him, close enough to see the hope in his eyes. Then I held up my left hand. The ring caught the light sparkling against my finger. Julian's eyes dropped to it, and I watched the hope drain from his face. I'm engaged, I said quietly. I'm getting married next spring. No. He shook his head, refusing to believe it. No, you can't be. You're just saying that to hurt me. I'm not. His name is Marcus. He's a professor at the university. We've been together for over a year, and I love him. I love him in a way I never loved you. That's not true. Julian's voice rose. You loved me. I know you did. You wouldn't have stayed for 3 years if you didn't. I stayed because I didn't know my own worth. I stayed because you'd convinced me that love meant accepting less than I deserved. I stayed because I was afraid of being alone. I met his eyes, steady and calm. But I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm not the woman you left behind. Julian's face crumpled. For a moment I thought he might cry. Clara, please. I'll do anything. I'll move here. I'll wait. You'll leave. Marcus's voice cut through the room like a blade. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, his face pale, his jaw tight. He must have come to meet me for lunch. He must have heard everything. Marcus. I started toward him, but he held up a hand. It's okay. He stepped into the room, his eyes fixed on Julian. You must be Julian. Julian straightened, some of his old arrogance flickering back. And you must be the professor. I am. Marcus moved to stand beside me, sliding an arm around my waist. I'm also the man she's going to marry. The man who loves her. The man who would never leave her standing alone at an engagement party. Julian's face reddened. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know enough. Marcus's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. I know you had 3 years to treat her right and you didn't. I know you chose someone else on the most important day of her life. I know you let your friends mock her and your women disrespect her and never once stood up for her. I know all of that, and I know that I would never ever do any of those things. For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Then Julian's shoulders sagged. She's really happy, he asked quietly. With you? Yes, Marcus said. She really is. Julian looked at me one last time. There was pain in his eyes and regret, and something that might have been the beginning of acceptance. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. I nodded. I know. And I forgive you. But I can't go back. I won't. He left without another word. When the door closed behind him, I turned into Marcus's arms and let myself cry, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that it was finally over. Relief that I'd been strong enough to say no. Relief that the life I'd built was real and solid and mine. I'm sorry you had to hear that, I whispered against his chest. Don't be. He kissed the top of my head. I'm glad I was here. I'm glad you said what you said. I meant every word. I know. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes soft. I know you did. We stood there for a long time holding each other while the city hummed on outside the window. And for the first time since Julian walked through that door, I felt completely at peace. The wedding was perfect. Not in the way my engagement party had been supposed to be perfect, carefully planned, meticulously executed, every detail accounted for. This was different. This was intimate and warm and real. We held it in a garden overlooking the harbor just as we'd planned. The weather cooperated, offering a spring afternoon so beautiful it felt staged. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. Daniel gave a speech that made everyone laugh. Marcus's parents welcomed me into their family with open arms and tears in their eyes. And when I walked down the aisle toward the man I loved, I didn't feel a single moment of doubt. Not one. Afterward, at the reception, my brother pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked. "Really okay?" I looked across the room at Marcus, laughing at something his father had said, his face bright with joy. "Really okay," I said. "Better than okay." Daniel followed my gaze and smiled. "He's a good man." "The best." "Better than the last one." I laughed. "That's a low bar." "Still." He put an arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you, Clara. For leaving. For building this. For not going back when he showed up." I hadn't told him about Julian's visit. He must have heard from someone else. "How did you know?" "Marcus called me. The night it happened. Said he thought I should know in case you needed to talk." Daniel shook his head. "Classy move. Most guys would have kept it to themselves." That was Marcus. Always thinking of others, always putting me first, always doing the right thing even when it was hard. "He's something special," I said. "Yeah." Daniel squeezed my shoulder. "He is." That night, after the last guest had left and the sun had set over the harbor, Marcus and I walked back to our hotel room hand in hand. The city lights sparkled below us and the air was warm with the promise of summer. "Mrs. Chen," Marcus said, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." "Clara Chen." I tried it myself. "I like it too." He stopped walking and pulled me into his arms. "Are you happy?" "Deliriously." "Good." He kissed me softly. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. I'll hold you to that." He laughed and kissed me again. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the test in disbelief, my hands shaking, my mind racing through 1,000 thoughts at once. We'd talked about having children eventually, but eventually had always felt like something in the distant future. Something to plan for, to prepare for, to worry about. Now eventually was here. Marcus was at the university when I called him. He answered on the first ring as he always did. "Clara? Everything okay? I need you to come home." My voice was strange, even to my own ears. "Now? What's wrong? Are you hurt? Is it?" "Nothing's wrong. Just come home. Please." He was there in 20 minutes. He must have run half the way. I was sitting on the couch, the test still in my hand, when he burst through the door. His eyes found mine, then dropped to the plastic stick I was holding. "Clara." His voice was barely a whisper. "Is that?" I nodded. I couldn't speak. He crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to his knees in front of me. His hands cupped my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "We're having a baby?" he asked. "We're having a baby." He laughed, that shy, warm laugh I loved, and pulled me into his arms. "Clara. Clara, this is incredible. Are you okay? Are you happy? Is this?" "I'm happy." I was laughing now too, crying and laughing at the same time. "I'm so happy. I'm scared. And overwhelmed. And happy." "Me too." He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. "Me too." The next 8 months were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments and baby shopping and late-night conversations about names and nurseries and whether we were ready to be parents. We decided we weren't ready, whoever was, but we were going to do it anyway. Our daughter was born on a Tuesday in August. We named her Lily after Marcus's grandmother. She had his dark hair and my blue eyes and a cry that could shatter glass. She was perfect. The first time I held her, something shifted inside me. All the doubts, all the fears, all the what-ifs that had haunted my pregnancy, they didn't disappear exactly, but they faded into the background. In their place was something fiercer. Something protective and primal and absolutely certain. I would do anything for this child. I would be anything for this child. I would give her the life I'd never known was possible, the life I'd found only after losing everything. When Marcus came to sit beside me, his arm around my shoulders, his eyes on our daughter, I felt complete in a way I'd never imagined. "Look what we made," he whispered. "She's beautiful. Just like her mother." I leaned into him, and for a moment the world was perfect. 5 years passed like a breath. Lily grew from a baby into a little girl with her father's laugh and my stubbornness and a vocabulary that amazed everyone she met. The company expanded beyond anything we'd imagined, and I stepped back from day-to-day operations to spend more time with my family. Marcus published his book, then another, and became one of the most respected voices in his field. We were happy. Not the performative happiness I'd once chased with Julian, all grand gestures and public appearances. This was quieter, deeper. The kind of happiness that came from ordinary moments: breakfast together on Sunday mornings, bedtime stories with Lily, lazy afternoons in the park. I thought about Julian sometimes. Not often and not with longing. Just occasionally. Wondering where he was, how he was doing, whether he'd ever found whatever it was he'd been looking for. Then, one day, I found out. I was scrolling through news on my phone while Lily napped, half paying attention to headlines I'd forget in 5 minutes. Then one stopped me cold. Croft Industries sold to sister after years of decline. Former CEO relocates overseas. I clicked on the article. It detailed everything I hadn't known about Julian's life after I left. The company's slow collapse under his leadership. The disastrous investments. The scandals involving his sponsored student, Isabel, who'd eventually turned on him, selling company secrets to competitors. His sister's return from abroad, her takeover of the company, her decision to send Julian to manage a failing branch in Africa. The article ended with a single line that made my breath catch. Croft, 42, was reportedly killed last week during civil unrest in the region. His sister has declined to comment. Killed. Julian was dead. I set the phone down slowly, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to feel. Should I feel sad? I hadn't loved him for years. Should I feel relieved? That seemed cruel. Should I feel nothing at all? Instead, I felt quiet. A strange, peaceful quiet, like the last note of a song finally fading away. He was part of my story. For better or worse, he'd shaped the person I became. Without his betrayal, I might never have found the strength to leave. Without my leaving, I might never have found Marcus. Without Marcus, I might never have known what real love felt like. In a strange way, I owed him something. Not gratitude, never gratitude, but acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that even the worst moments can lead to something better if you let them. Mommy. Lily's voice drifted from her room. I'm awake. I went to her, scooping her into my arms and breathing in the warm, sleepy smell of her. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pressed her face into my shoulder. Did you have a good nap, sweetheart? Ham. She pulled back to look at me. Why are you sad? I blinked. What makes you think I'm sad? Your eyes. She touched my face gently. They look sad. Kids saw everything. They felt everything. They knew when something was wrong even when you tried to hide it. I'm not sad, Lily. I kissed her forehead. I'm just thinking about something. But I'm okay. I promise. Daddy. She spotted Marcus in the doorway and wiggled out of my arms to run to him. He caught her, swinging her up onto his hip, and looked at me over her head. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded. I'll tell you later. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on the balcony with Marcus and told him about Julian. He listened without interrupting, his hand warm in mine. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. Honestly. I looked out at the harbor, at the lights reflecting off the water. I feel like a chapter of my life just closed. One I didn't even realize was still open. Marcus squeezed my hand. That makes sense. I don't love him. I haven't loved him for years. But he was part of my life for a long time. Part of who I was. I turned to look at him. Is it wrong that I'm not sad? No. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. It's not wrong. You're not sad because there's nothing to be sad about. He made his choices. You made yours. And yours led you here. Here. To this balcony, this city, this life. To a husband who loved me and a daughter who saw my sadness even when I tried to hide it. To a future I'd never dared to imagine. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For everything. For waiting for me. For loving me. For giving me this life. He smiled, and in his eyes I saw everything I needed. Thank you for letting me. The next year my film premiered. Not a film I'd directed, that wasn't my path, but a film I'd written. A screenplay I'd started in those first months in Amber when I was still healing, still learning to be myself again. I'd worked on it in bits and pieces over the years, never quite believing it would amount to anything. Then a producer read it. Then another. Then suddenly there was funding and a director and actors who spoke my words like they meant something. The premiere was held in the city where it all began. Where I'd left Julian at the altar. Where I'd found the courage to walk away. My parents came. Daniel came. Marcus stood beside me in a tuxedo that made my heart skip, and Lily held my hand in her flower girl dress, too young to understand what was happening but old enough to know it was important. The theater was packed. I sat in the front row, Marcus on one side, Lily on the other, and watched my story unfold on screen. It wasn't my story, not exactly. The characters were fictional, the plot invented. But underneath it all was the same truth I'd lived, that love shouldn't hurt. That leaving isn't failure. That happiness is possible if you're brave enough to reach for it. When the credits rolled, the applause was deafening. Lily tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, why is everyone clapping? Because they liked the movie, sweetheart. Did you make it? I wrote it, yes. She thought about this for a moment, her little face serious. Then she smiled, that smile that was pure Marcus, and said, You're the best mommy ever. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. Later, at the after party, I found myself standing alone for a moment, looking out at the crowd. Marcus was getting us drinks. Lily was with my parents, charming everyone she met. The room was full of people I'd come to know and love over the past 8 years. And in that moment, I thought of the woman I'd been on the day of my engagement party. The woman in the ruined dress on the bathroom floor. The woman who thought her life was over. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now. That the worst moment of her life would become the best thing that ever happened to her. That the pain she felt would fade and in its place would grow something stronger. That love wasn't supposed to be hard, it was supposed to be home. Penny for your thoughts. Marcus appeared beside me, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. I took one and smiled. I was just thinking about how different my life is now. How different I am. Good different. The best different. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine. I love you, Marcus Chen. He kissed my temple. I love you too, Clara Chen. Now and always. Across the room, Lily laughed at something my father said, the sound carrying over the music and conversation like a bell. And I knew with absolute certainty that everything I'd been through had led me exactly where I was supposed to be. Right here. Right now. Home.